So this question comes from @J2F972. And they said, how long have you been doing exercise for how many years? We're going to go over that as well as some of the various methodologies I've trained in this coming video. So, in order for how many years I've actually been doing training, technically I kind of have been doing it my whole life. So it's like when I was a kid, I was enthralled with comic books. I also was a big fan of like Schwarzenegger movies and Stallone movies. So the seeds back then were planted in my mind. And I remember being a kid and testing my strength on things like lifting chairs and lifting rocks with my friends and that sort of thing. But when I first started formally, consistently training, that was around when I was 16 or 17 years old, and I never really stopped since. And right now, chronologically, I'm 42 years old, although I oftentimes tell people I identify as 27. So, some of the different methodologies that I've gone through over the years was back when I was like 16, 17, I started training to support the martial arts that I was taking. And the training consisted of push-ups, pull-ups, hitting the heavy bag, hitting the speed bag, monkey bars, which I had installed in my parents' basement, and some of the other things like that. And my parents actually also gave me a weight set, and I would sometimes use it back when I was like 10 years old, but it wasn't really that heavy. It was those the plastic plates that had the cement in it and that sort of thing. But those kinds of things planted the seeds. Having been in wrestling, I went through the wrestling methods of training. And after wrestling was over, in an effort to fill the gap in my day with more that was normally used for training and to do more training, I joined a local gym and did machine-based stuff during that time. Didn't really transfer that well to the martial arts, but it did give me a physique that got me attention from the opposite sex, which was part of the thing that gave me the confidence that I needed to be myself. And in doing so, gave me a passion for training, which I later turned, well, you see where it took me. After leaving that gym, I joined another gym that had a powerlifting team involved with it. And I would sometimes hang out with the powerlifters, though I didn't do powerlifting specifically. I was experimenting more with like bodybuilding methodologies back then with standard weights, but a lot of that was just from information taken from magazines and Arnold's Bodybuilding Encyclopedia. Some of that stuff still has credence. Most of it I've discarded. So after those methodologies, I left the gym, and right about that time, the internet was starting to explode. And there was like all of these different methodologies that employed. And it's like I experimented with sandbags and I experimented with elastic bands. But the ones that really got my attention was kettlebell training. There was something about the Russian kettlebell itself that drew me to it. And I think it's because it has that like dungeon-esque aspect to it. And Pavel Tsatsouline, who was like the one who popularized kettlebell training here in the United States, would write about how the old-time strongmen used them as part of their training. And that was actually one of the things that like really, really, really piqued my interest in these. Technically, I had read about the old-time strongmen in Arnold's Bodybuilding Encyclopedia, but it wasn't it was the way Pavel had written about it. He had a way of getting you enthusiastic about strength, which just fed the flame even further and led to me searching out the ways of the old timers. And also at the time, because it was the internet, all of the strength texts were available because they became public domain, which meant that anybody was free to use them. And there was a website that published like all of them. And it was a great way of being able to understand their methodologies. I read Eugene Sandow's book, and it was okay. I think a lot of it was just more of him just trying to be a salesman. I had read Charles Atlas's book, and I found value in it. But probably the one that had the most value was Arthur Saxon's methods. Earl Lederman had some good stuff too, but it was Arthur Saxon that seemed to have the most honest take on things, where he treated training like practice, lifting heavy, staying fresh, which is what I did for a long time, right? Because that was a cornerstone for Pavel's methodologies. And I was following Pavel's methodologies pretty nearly exclusively for the better part of a decade. Somewhere along the lines, somewhere along the line, when I was training with kettlebells, that was around the time that I discovered through one of my friends, the Iron Tamer David Whitley, that there was a group of modern day practitioners. Iron Tamer Dave Whitley was the first one I ever saw roll up frying pans and twist horseshoes and bend nails. I mean, technically, I had seen Mark Henry roll up a frying pan on WWE SmackDown way back in the day. But Iron Tamer was the first person I saw in person, and I got to talking to Dave, and we had like an instant friendship that we still have today. He was actually the one that informed me that the Man of Steel, Sonny Barry, had died. But it was through Dave that I discovered that there was a conference where like all of the modern day steel bending practitioners would come. And that's where I met Slim the Hammerman Farman. And that's where I would later meet my first mentor, the late New Jersey Superman, Greg Matonic. Now, Greg took me under his wing. So for a good period of time, my methodology was bending steel and progressing with the steel, using that as its own methodology. And I would fill in the gaps with the kettlebells, doing things like swings and get-ups and goblet squats and front squats and overhead pressing and stuff like that. Then I had come back into barbell training, and I still kept with kettlebell training, and I still kept with strongman training or steel bending. And that's kind of like what I've shifted to most recently, is like heavily barbell based. I still do plenty of kettlebell stuff. I still bend steel, obviously, because that is part of my career. And it's also what makes me what makes my training studio the Purple Cow here in Boonton on Main Street. And with that, that's when I started like really dialing into the programming behind barbells, not just lifting heavy, staying fresh. That was around when I turned 40. I started having more of an interest in hypertrophy. And part of that is because the feats of strength are still there. If I go on stage, I know I'm going to be okay. But I also knew that like when you hit 40 years old, muscle mass starts to decline if you're not actively taking steps to build it. And I want to be able to continue to have muscle mass, because that's one of the things that helps people age gracefully. And also, when I'm on stage, people want me to look the part of a superhero. It's like they look at me like I'm a modern day superhero, and I like that, and I like feeling good about the way I look. So that's been a major focus, is bodybuilding with a particular focus in strength. It's not just about pumping up the muscles. It's about getting stronger overall. And a lot of that methodology was inspired by both Dan John and heavily Paul McElroy, and also Brett Contreras. And there's others too that I'm missing out on. But yeah, that's been kind of my training journey. So I know what you asked is a simple question that could have been answered in, what is that? Well, 42 minus 16, you do the math. But I wanted to give you more than just a simple number. I wanted to explain a bit further. So anyways, if you like this video, let me know by hitting that like button. If you want to see more of this sort of thing, or you want to see the chronicles from my various strength performances across the country, subscribe to the channel. If you think anybody should see this, please share it with them. This YouTube thing isn't rocket science. And if you want to support the channel, do all of the things that I just mentioned. That helps the channel grow, puts me into the algorithm, so that I can get found by more people that are into this sort of thing. And if you want to further support the channel, you could pick up a copy of my book, available on Amazon. I'm going to try to put the link in the description below, or you can buy some coffee from Good For You Coffee Club, which it's good coffee and it's free of like preservatives and pesticides and crap like that. And if you do that, use the promo code MyPower10 to save 10% off of any order you use that for. Links are in the description below. But that's it for today. In the meantime, please stay tuned for next time and stay happy, healthy, and strong. Eric Moss, over and out.